Hi guys, so it's time to do the shape of your heart project. And I called it the shape of your heart because the first one that I did was the heart. Um, but it's also because the idea is to pick your favorite shape or to create a shape that you like and want to do this project with. If you've noticed, I created 3 different shape templates in case you wanted one and you had trouble figuring out what you wanted to use, or you weren't sure how to actually make the shape correctly for this project. You have a heart, a star, and a hexagon. So you can pick any of those 3. You could do your own shape. That's entirely up to you. For this project, I am actually going to do the hexagon because I think that's really cool. So to start with this project, you'll need whichever shape you want, and you can make the template first if you want to, or you can just cut the shape or draw the shape directly onto your sheet of paper. And I will show you how to do that. So what we're going to do first is get your background, this sheet, and your background, whichever one you want. And I'm using the salt sheet. So if you see on my paper right there, the little spots left by the salt absorbing the water. So you get your background that you've painted with whichever technique you want to use, a piece of construction paper, scissors, glue, a pencil, and then this sheet. Okay, your template sheet. So the first thing we're going to do is make our construction paper the same size as our background, because if you notice, it is not the same size. There's a lot of black paper around my white background. So I'm just going to lay my background that I chose against the edges of the black paper, because I'm going to measure it, and then I'm going to cut my black paper out to match that. So line it up as close to the edges you can get so that it is the right size. And then I've got it off a little bit on this side. There we go. And then just trace the outline of your paper. And I would do it down, face down, so that you're not accidentally writing on your paper. So lay your watercolor background aside and then trim your black piece of paper to the right shape, to the right size. If they match, and they might, because there are some sheets of watercolor paper that are the same size, but most of the time your watercolor paper is going to be smaller than your watercolor background. I mean, construction paper. So throw my trash away. I actually put that in my scrap pile because I like to save my scraps for collages. Now you have your paper that matches the same size as your background. And your piece of printer paper is not going to be exactly the same size, but that's okay because it'll work out just fine. I'll show you in a minute why. What I'm going to do with this, I'm going to fold this paper in half. So now I have it half. Now I'm going to cut it in half because we only need 1/2 of this paper. So set the other half aside. You can use that for another project later. And then you're going to cut out the outside of your shape. Whatever the shape is, you're going to go ahead and cut that out. just the outside one. So now you have your shape cut out. You're going to bring your background and your half of your black paper, and you're going to line it up like this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to line this up as close to the center, top and bottom as I can. You could measure it if you like, but you don't have to. And I'm going to put the bottom point of my hexagon lined up with the black paper. And the top point of my hexagon is going to be lined up with the edge of my black paper at the center point. We are going to now trace our shape with our pencil. So what I want you to do is very lightly trace. Well, on the black paper you can do it a little bit darker, but trace the shape of your hexagon or whatever it is, the outline of it, onto your paper. And now on the watercolor part, I'm going to trace it very lightly. Just a very light, line. It's so hard to trace on that line. There we go. Okay, so then I'm going to lift that off. So now I have this. Keep your paper on there, lined up. If it moves a little bit, do your best to get it back into alignment. And then we're going to trace right through the middle, right down the middle of this line. Just very lightly trace the edge of your black paper right down the center of your shape. So now you'll have your background that looks like this with the half of your shape traced on it and your black piece of paper that has the other half. Okay. Excuse me. So now we're going to trim the inside of this shape. Hexagon. So I've trimmed off, and now I have the smaller shape. So, oops, turned my paper the wrong way. From here, I'm going to line my paper back up. I'm going to erase this line that I drew on here. There we go. Line it up. Put this paper in, and you're going to do the same thing where you line up the points to the edge of your paper and try to come in to where it looks about even, top and bottom. And then you're going to trace it just like you did. So you're going to do lightly tracing it on the watercolor side. And then you can do it a bit darker on the black paper so that you can see your line better. And again, we're just creating our guide for when we cut, so we know exactly where to put our pieces of paper. Okay. So then you're going to do the same thing all the way to the center shape. You're going to cut the next smaller shape out, trace it on both sides, and then come down to the next one and trace that on both sides of your paper. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then we will go to how we place them. So I have finished tracing my hexagons onto my paper. So yours should look something like this based on the shape that you drew. Okay, so now that we have our guide drawn onto our paper, we're going to start cutting. And if you notice, my lines on here are really dark on my watercolor paper. Yours should not be that dark. I made mine this dark so that they could be seen in the video. Okay, so you want to do yours lighter, like right here. And you can go back in and you can erase lightly those lines so that they're not so dark. But you have to remember, when you erase on watercolor, you will erase some of the color that you have down, okay? So you don't want to erase too much. Picking it up just a little bit, erasing just a little is okay. Don't bear down, because you will pull up the color, okay? So now we're going to cut out our shapes. So kind of like we did with the optical illusion shape, we're going to work from the outside in for this one, but we're going to lay them out the same way we did for the optical illusion. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to cut the largest shape out. And we're not going to glue anything until we have everything laid out and everything in the right, and to have everything cut out and laid into the right position. That way, if we put it in the wrong place, we can fix it. Because once it's glued down, it could tear the paper, and we don't want to tear our picture. So I'm going to lay this back over here. So this is going to be, when we're done, this is going to be glued down like that, okay? But we're going to leave it there for now. And then we're going to cut out our next so you're going to cut out that next part of the hexagon, or whatever shape you're using. And remember, just like with the other the illusion project, you want to make sure these are falling down in the right, on the right side, because you don't want it to flip over. Okay, so now I have it, and this is exactly the way it was connected. So I'm going to turn it like this, lay it down, and then flip it. So now I have this piece laying exactly in between those lines that I traced on that shape. That's why I did it. It's a guide. And it's not quite perfect because I cut a little different. But you can go back in once we're all done and erase those little bit of pencil lines. Okay, so leave that laying there. Take this piece again, and we're going to trim that next section out. So that fell straight down. This fits perfectly in here. We're going to turn it to where that lays down. And this one is going to stay on this side. So we're going to put that one lined up right there. And it will fit when we go to do it and glue it down. So that came directly out of in there. Okay, now we're going to trim out the next one. So that fell straight down. It fits in perfectly just like this. Lay it this way. This one's going to come over to this side. So I'm just flipping it directly over like you're flipping the page of a book. And again, it doesn't have to be perfectly lined up yet because we haven't started gluing anything. And then we're going to cut out the next shape. That goes in there. Lay this down. This piece comes out. That one stays. And we're going to cut out the next part. So that fits in there. Turn it like this. This piece lays down. This one flips over like that. Now you have your silhouette created. Now we're going to glue it down. But before we glue it down, we can add more to the side if we would like to, so that we have more balance in our picture. Because if you notice, this one, my heart took up a whole lot more of the black. So you have more of the page filled. This one has very little of the page filled. And you can leave it just like this if you want, if your shape is smaller. Or, so if you want to put more and fill in more where you have a little bit more of your watercolor showing on this side and a little bit more covered on this side, you can use your shape and you can lay it over here like this, and you can trace that. So you see how I lined the center of it up? So I put those two center points and lined it up with the edge of my black paper. You can do that like that. And I'm going to put another one here. So I'm going to add a couple more to this to give it a little bit more where you can see more of my pretty watercolor background. You don't have to do this. You can if you want to. You can leave it just like it was. I'm going to come down again and I'm going to put another one here, lining it up. It's not quite even. Let's see, there's about that much space. I'm kind of trying to get them in about the same area, on the same, the same distance from that point to there and this point to there. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I want it close. So then I'll trace it. And this is before I've glued anything down. Then I'm going to add one more right here. So this one is, if I take my ruler and I line it up with the edge of that, and I bring it over where it's parallel with the edge, so it's straight. My ruler is as close to straight as I can get it without actually measuring. I'm going to do another one over here, so they're in the same place. Trace this one. Now I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to cut out each of these one at a time. So I'm going to cut out this shape at the bottom first. And I want it to stay exactly the way that it came out of the paper. Okay. So now I have like this. I'm going to flip this completely like this and line it up like this. And then I'm going to trace this shape in that place on the watercolor. So this came out of here like that. And then I'm going to flip this piece and lay it right there. So now that's where it's going to go when I glue it down. And then it'll be like that. I'm going to cut out my next shape and do the same thing with the next shape. So this would be laying like this. Flip it completely over, lay my piece right there next to it, lay this down, and trace this. Pick it up and lay this piece back in there so I don't lose this one, because these may not be exactly the same size from when I cut them. So I want to make sure I'm putting the correct shape in the right spot. Okay, so then I'm going to turn this back over, trim out my next one. Okay. So now we have our picture like this. So now we've got to start gluing things down. So what I'm going to glue down first is this centerpiece right here. So I picked it up this way. I'm going to flip it over and put the glue on the back. And we have these guidelines on our paper where we traced. So I'm going to make sure that I'm lining this inside piece up with that halfway line that goes this way and the 2 points so it's lined up with the center line and it meets each of the points. Now I'm going to glue down this piece. So I lifted it up this way and I'm going to put the glue on the back. And I'm going to line up those points and make sure that as I'm laying it down, it fits into that shape that was traced on there. And it might not fit perfectly because remember when we cut with the scissors, we might miss the line just a little bit. So it'll be close enough and you can go back and erase just a little bit more on that. Now I'm going to do this one. Make sure you're lining it up. And I'm going to do this one. Make sure when you're picking it up, you're gluing the part that was laying on the background and not the top part, because sometimes it can get switched. So just pay attention and lay it right back down into that outline. Everything should be lining up pretty close. If it's off just a tad, that's okay. And do the last piece. This one was a little off from the line. So see, I don't know if you can tell, but right there's my pencil line. So I cut that one just a little bit weird when I cut that shape out. I went way above the line. So like I said, you can just gently go in with your pencil eraser and just lightly erase. Don't do it too hard because you will pick up the watercolor. So anywhere you see those pencil lines, you can. So now I'm going to glue down my outside pieces. And I traced them so I knew exactly where to place them down. Because if I hadn't, then I would have put them in the wrong place and it wouldn't have matched. So if it wouldn't have been a symmetrical picture where if I folded it in half, it would have been in the exact same spot. Just different. What am I trying to say? Well, it would have, yeah, I'll cut that part. So once I get all of these pieces done, I'm going to pick up this one and glue it down. So I'm going to line it up in my corner, line it up here. Actually, it didn't go all the way to my corner, so I can fortunately peel this glue up. So be careful. I would start with the inside, lining it up with that middle piece where the halfway line is that you drew. I would start with that part. Maybe. Stuck to my finger. Yes. Like that. Got off just a little bit on this side. There we go. And now you have your next project finished. So if you have any questions or comments, if you need any more direction on that one, please let me know and I will try to help you. You can always watch the video a second time. Watch it through one time first and then watch the end of it. now that I'm telling you that at the end of the video. But there you go. I hope you enjoyed it.